Ladies and gentlemen, let's begin with a question that appears simple, even trivial on the surface. What does it mean to look younger than your age? Now, that might seem like a cosmetic concern, a biological quirk, or the outcome of good genetics and moisturizer. But I would argue, no, I would insist, that it's a much deeper indicator, a signal of alignment between chaos and order in a human life. To look younger than your age is not merely to possess smoother skin or a more agile body. It is, in many cases, to carry yourself in such a way that vitality has not been extinguished by despair. Looking younger than your age is often dismissed as a matter of genetics, skincare, or luck. But beneath the surface, there may be something far more profound at work. When a person appears more youthful than their chronological years suggest, it can be a reflection of deep inner harmony and resilience, a sign that they have not allowed the full weight of life's suffering to crush them. Life, by its very nature, involves hardship, pain, and complexity. No one escapes this. But how we respond to this reality, how we choose to carry the burdens placed on our shoulders, has a powerful impact on not only our emotional and psychological well-being, but also our physical presence in the world. Many people age rapidly because they are overwhelmed by the chaos of their own lives. They may be living in ways that are fundamentally out of alignment with who they truly are. Perhaps they are trapped in jobs they hate, relationships that drain them, or patterns of behavior that are self-destructive. When a person continually ignores their internal compass, what might be called the conscience, they begin to fragment. They lose coherence. This disintegration doesn't just stay hidden, it shows. The body becomes a map of the inner world. The face, the posture, the voice. These all reflect the condition of the soul, metaphorically speaking. Stress, bitterness, regret, and unspoken anger leave marks, and they age a person in visible ways. On the other hand, someone who appears younger than their age may be someone who has managed to maintain a certain alignment between their internal values and external actions. They haven't necessarily had an easier life often, it's the opposite, but they've chosen to respond to suffering with courage and honesty rather than resentment or avoidance. That choice, repeated over time, creates stability. It fosters resilience, and resilience, unlike brittle resistance, has a kind of flexibility to it. It bends without breaking. It adapts without surrendering principle. That adaptability is part of what gives rise to the lightness we associate with youth. This isn't to say that the person who looks young is without struggle. Rather, it suggests they've found a way to metabolize struggle without letting it poison them. When someone is psychologically integrated, when they're not torn apart by guilt, shame, or internal conflict, there's a kind of peace that emanates from them. That peace can appear as energy, vitality, and yes, even physical youthfulness. It's not about avoiding hardship, it's about not being destroyed by it, and that takes work, serious, sustained inner work. Furthermore, people who look younger often maintain a sense of purpose. Purpose is not just a motivational slogan, it's a biological necessity. When someone has a reason to get out of bed in the morning that transcends pleasure or comfort, their nervous system is calibrated differently. They're driven by something greater than themselves. That orientation toward meaning rather than comfort fosters growth, and growth keeps the spirit alive. When the spirit is alive, the body follows to some extent. You see it in their eyes, their movement, even in the way they speak. There's presence, and presence is inherently youthful. There is also something to be said for the role of discipline in this equation. Looking younger is often the byproduct of a disciplined life, not necessarily in terms of diet or exercise, though those help, but in the discipline of thought and behavior. Someone who is careful with their words, who seeks to tell the truth, who avoids unnecessary conflict but doesn't shrink from responsibility. Such a person is internally ordered, and order reduces chaos. The body, in turn, reflects that order. There is less inflammation, less stress response, fewer signs of breakdown. The systems of the body aren't constantly taxed by emotional volatility or unresolved trauma. But make no mistake, none of this is accidental. It doesn't come from doing what's easy. It comes from doing what's right repeatedly across time. That consistency builds integrity, and integrity, in the truest sense, is wholeness. It is the absence of fragmentation. A person with integrity isn't perfect, but they're integrated. They know who they are, and they are not at war with themselves. That lack of internal conflict is rare, and it's powerful. It's one of the things people notice, often unconsciously, when they say someone seems young for their age. They are sensing peace in a world where most people are exhausted from fighting themselves. This doesn't mean that every wrinkle is a moral failure, or that looking older is a sign of weakness. That would be absurd. But what it does mean is that appearance often tells a deeper story. And that story, in many cases, is about how a person has lived. Whether they've told the truth, whether they've taken responsibility, and whether they've treated themselves and others with care. Those choices add up. They don't just shape the character, they shape the body. So if someone looks younger than their age, it may be a surface-level signal of something profound, that they have chosen to live in alignment with their values, that they've learned how to face pain without becoming bitter, and that they've managed somehow to keep their inner world coherent. Amidst the chaos of life, that is not just admirable, it is deeply human, and it's something worth striving for, regardless of how old we are. Vitality is often misunderstood in modern culture. It's frequently reduced to superficial traits, a toned body, glowing skin, or a burst of energy. But true vitality, lasting, grounded, and deeply human vitality, comes from something far more significant than appearance or fitness routines. It is the byproduct of truth, responsibility, and alignment with one's values. This kind of vitality can't be faked. It's not cosmetic, and it doesn't depend on trends. It arises from the inner architecture of a person who is living in accordance with what is meaningful, rather than what is merely expedient or socially acceptable. At its core, human beings are wired to seek meaning. Without it, even pleasure becomes hollow, and success turns sour. The individual who lives disconnected from their own truth, who says yes when they mean no, who hides what they believe to preserve peace, or who trades responsibility for short-term comfort, will, over time, pay a price. That price often shows up in subtle but real ways: fatigue, cynicism, chronic anxiety, and yes, physical aging that outpaces time. When the inner world is in disarray, the outer world reflects it. In contrast, someone who lives truthfully, who speaks carefully and aligns their actions with what they genuinely believe, develops a kind of quiet strength. They begin to trust themselves because they are not in the business of betrayal. This self-trust fosters clarity, and with clarity comes energy. The energy isn't frantic or manic, it's steady, focused, and sustainable. It supports action that is purposeful rather than reactive. Such a person doesn't waste emotional resources covering up lies or playing roles that aren't theirs. They are not performing for approval. They are acting out of principle. This alignment creates coherence between the inner and outer worlds, and that coherence is, in part, what people intuit when they say someone looks young for their age. Responsibility plays a crucial role in this process. It's fashionable in certain circles to view responsibility as a burden, something to be avoided or outsourced, but this is a deeply flawed understanding. Responsibility is not simply an obligation, it is the mechanism through which meaning is made. When a person accepts responsibility for their choices, their relationships, and their future, they begin to act with intention. That intention orders their world, and a well-ordered world, internally and externally, reduces unnecessary suffering. This reduction in suffering doesn't mean a lack of challenges. Life will remain difficult, but when responsibility is accepted voluntarily, difficulty becomes bearable, even meaningful. In fact, people often report feeling more alive when they are shouldering something significant. They are no longer drifting, they are anchored, and in that anchored state, something remarkable happens. They begin to grow, and that growth breathes life into their entire being. The physical benefits of this psychological integration are not imagined. Chronic stress, resentment, and regret produce very real biological consequences. Inflammation, sleep disruption, accelerated cellular aging. These are not metaphors. They are measurable outcomes of living in contradiction. On the flip side, individuals who cultivate peace through truth, telling, and responsibility often experience the opposite. Their nervous systems are more regulated, their energy is less fragmented, and their physiology reflects that. They may not even intend to look younger, but the body mirrors the state of the mind. This brings us to another point often overlooked in discussions of youthfulness, the connection between openness and aging. Youthfulness is not merely the absence of wrinkles or gray hair. It is, in its most fundamental form, a state of receptivity. Young people are open. They ask questions, explore ideas, and believe in the possibility of change. As people grow older, that openness often narrows. Life disappoints them, and they respond by closing off. They become rigid in their thinking, cynical in their tone, and guarded in their emotions. This psychological rigidity manifests physically. The face hardens, the eyes dull, and the body becomes stiff. Again, these are not poetic exaggerations. They are accurate reflections of the mind-body connection. So what does it mean when someone retains their youthfulness well into middle or old age? It often means they've managed to preserve their openness, not through naivety, but through courage. They have continued to learn, to question, to adapt, and to take risks. They haven't retreated into a shell of certainty or bitterness. They remain engaged with life as a dynamic process, not a fixed set of outcomes. This flexibility, this willingness to be shaped by experience without becoming jaded, is what keeps them youthful, and it is deeply connected to truth and responsibility. Openness also implies humility. The person who is truly open knows that they don't have all the answers. They don't pretend to be in control of everything. Instead, they remain attentive to what life is teaching them. That humility protects them from the kind of pride that isolates and ages the soul. By remaining humble, they continue to grow, and growth in its essence is life itself. To grow is to live, and to live fully is to remain, at some level, young. So when we talk about someone looking younger than their age, it might be tempting to attribute that to surface-level traits. But often, what we are really witnessing is the external result of deep internal habits, the commitment to truth, the embrace of responsibility, and the preservation of openness. These are not quick fixes or beauty hacks. They are hard-earned patterns of living that transform not just the appearance, but the very substance of a person's being. They are what make youthfulness something more than a phase of life, something that can, in the deepest sense, be chosen. True youthfulness goes far beyond physical appearance. It is not confined to skin texture, hair color, or the number of candles on a birthday cake. At its core, youthfulness is a quality of being, a way of relating to the world, and a mode of consciousness marked by openness, flexibility, and curiosity. When a person remains psychologically and emotionally youthful, they maintain an ability to engage with life, even in the face of pain, disappointment, and complexity. To look younger than your age may therefore reflect more than good genetics or skincare. It may indicate that you have not allowed yourself to be hardened by time, that you have preserved your capacity to stay open to life itself. Openness is not the same as ignorance or naivety. Children are naturally open because they haven't yet faced the full weight of suffering. But when an adult remains open, it usually means they have encountered difficulty and chosen not to let it shut them down. That is a much deeper form of strength. It takes immense courage to keep learning when it would be easier to retreat into dogma. It takes humility to admit you don't know when you've spent decades building an identity. And it takes discipline to resist the bitterness that comes from accumulated losses. Youthfulness, in this deeper sense, is not a condition given to the young. It is a way of being that must be earned and protected throughout life. We live in a world where many people gradually close themselves off to new experiences and perspectives. This often happens without anyone realizing it. A person gets hurt in a relationship, so they decide it's safer not to trust. They fail at a career goal, so they convince themselves that dreaming was foolish. They feel betrayed by life's unfairness, and so they adopt a worldview that justifies their resentment. These defensive structures might feel protective at first, but over time they turn into cages. They block growth, connection, and vitality. And with that loss of vitality comes the slow dulling of the spirit, which often manifests in the body itself. In contrast, when someone continues to ask questions, to see beauty, to listen earnestly, and to admit when they are wrong, they maintain a kind of fluidity. That fluidity is not just emotional or intellectual, it is existential. It reflects a refusal to let the past define the future. Such a person has not allowed pain to calcify into pessimism. They remain alive to what could be rather than stuck in what was. And that attitude of openness, of continuous engagement with reality, tends to show in the brightness of their eyes, the ease of their smile, and the energy in their posture. This form of youthfulness also demands integrity. Openness without grounding is chaos, but openness rooted in principle becomes wisdom. It allows a person to change their mind without losing their core. That ability, to remain flexible without becoming unanchored, is one of the rarest and most admirable human qualities. It is also deeply connected to emotional and physical health. People who are psychologically rigid tend to suffer more, not just mentally, but physically. Their bodies mirror their inflexibility. Chronic tension, fatigue, and disease often follow. Meanwhile, those who remain open and adaptive often experience greater resilience because they are not in constant internal conflict with reality. Another dimension of youthfulness lies in the willingness to connect. When people grow older, they often become isolated, not just socially, but emotionally. They stop reaching out, they stop listening, they stop letting others affect them. This emotional isolation hardens a person. It can make them appear distant, cold, and prematurely aged. On the other hand, individuals who remain willing to connect, who remain present with others, who laugh easily, and who are moved by stories, carry a kind of warmth that transcends time. That warmth is not merely emotional, it is visible. It radiates from them in a way that defies age. Connection requires vulnerability, and vulnerability requires trust, not blind trust in others, but a basic trust in one's own ability to handle pain without being destroyed by it. That inner security is what allows people to remain open to life even when it has hurt them. It's what allows someone to say, "Yes, I have been wounded, but I will not let that close my heart." That statement is not sentimental. It is one of the most powerful acts a human being can make. It is the foundation of renewal, of regeneration, of youth that goes deeper than skin. When someone looks younger than their age, it might be because they have chosen, over and over again, not to harden. They have chosen to remain curious instead of cynical, hopeful instead of resigned, and connected instead of numb. These are not easy choices. They require awareness, intention, and sometimes profound courage. But the reward is that the person remains alive in the truest sense. Their presence remains vibrant, their mind remains sharp, and their spirit continues to grow. So when we speak of youthfulness, we should be clear. It is not merely about age or aesthetics. It is about how a person relates to life itself. The youthful are those who continue to expand, even in the face of adversity. They are those who retain the spark of possibility, who keep their hearts open without losing discernment, and who engage with the world not as a fixed story, but as an unfolding mystery. That is a quality far more enduring and far more beautiful than anything time can erase. In a world obsessed with appearances, it is easy to mistake youthfulness for something that can be bought, injected, or filtered. But there is a fundamental difference between looking young and being youthful in a way that is real and lasting. Authentic youthfulness is not about denial or disguise. It is something earned. It is the natural consequence of how a person lives, thinks, and responds to life's unavoidable suffering. There is a kind of vitality that cannot be faked because it is the outward expression of an inner structure that has been built over time through honesty, effort, and integrity. Looking young while feeling hollow inside is an increasingly common paradox. Social media, cosmetic procedures, and curated lifestyles make it possible to present an image of youth that does not match the reality of the person beneath it. But despite appearances, the body eventually reflects the truth. No mask holds up forever. If a person is consumed by resentment, guilt, or fear, these will find their way into posture, expression, and tone. People can sense inauthenticity, even if they don't know exactly what they're sensing. There is a disconnect, a dissonance. On the other hand, when someone appears youthful and also radiates peace, strength, and groundedness, we instinctively recognize that as real. That is the kind of youthfulness that is earned, not fabricated. To earn youthfulness in this sense is not to chase eternal pleasure or reject aging. It is to live in a way that integrates life's suffering rather than running from it. A person who looks younger than their years and whose presence feels light and clear is often someone who has learned how to carry pain without becoming bitter. They have developed tools for healing, honest conversation, personal responsibility, forgiveness, and meaning-making. These are not shortcuts. They require effort, awareness, and the willingness to confront parts of oneself that are uncomfortable or even painful. But over time, this inner work builds a kind of resilience that shows. It's not flashy or dramatic, but it's real and it's visible. There is a noticeable difference between someone who has avoided life's hard lessons and someone who has walked through them and come out stronger. The former often chases distraction, staying busy or consumed by surface-level concerns to avoid deeper truths. This lifestyle drains energy and creates anxiety. Over time, it can age a person dramatically. The latter, however, has done the difficult work of facing themselves. They have confronted their failures, admitted their weaknesses, and made peace with their limitations. And in doing so, they have lightened their load. That lightness becomes visible, not just emotionally, but physically. It's the difference between someone carrying unresolved pain and someone who has transformed it into something meaningful. The body and mind are not separate. Psychological integrity has physical consequences. A person who lives in alignment with their values doesn't carry the weight of constant contradiction. They are not pretending to be someone they are not. They are not spinning narratives to hide their shame. They are not manipulating others or themselves to preserve a false identity. This kind of internal honesty reduces stress at a fundamental level. It allows the nervous system to settle, the immune system to function better, and the body to age more slowly. The science is clear on this. Chronic stress accelerates aging, and much of that stress comes from living out of alignment with the truth. Looking young because of a well-ordered life is not about perfection. It is about consistency. It's about making choices that are difficult in the short term but meaningful in the long term. Telling the truth instead of lying. Setting boundaries instead of people pleasing. Taking responsibility instead of blaming others. Apologizing when you're wrong. Letting go of what no longer serves you. Each of these actions, small in isolation, builds a foundation over time, and that foundation supports real well-being, mentally, emotionally, and physically. It allows a person to rest rather than remain in constant internal conflict. That restfulness is visible in their face, their eyes, their tone, and their way of being. This doesn't mean that every youthful-looking person has mastered life, or that aging is a sign of failure. There are people who age visibly and yet possess incredible wisdom, joy, and peace. But when someone appears significantly younger than their years and carries an energy of calm and clarity, it's often because they have done the deep inner work that supports vitality. Their youthfulness is not an accident. It is the residue of integrity, of years lived with attention, intention, and courage. Ultimately, we must stop confusing artificial youth with authentic vitality. One can be applied temporarily and will fade with time. The other is built slowly and endures. The real question is not how young someone looks, but what their presence reveals. Do they bring calm into a room? Do they listen more than they speak? Do they move with purpose rather than panic? These are indicators of a life aligned with what matters. When youthfulness arises from such a foundation, it is not just impressive, it is inspiring. It reminds us that how we live shapes not only how we feel, but also how we appear. And that kind of youthfulness cannot be bought. It must be earned. Ask ChatGPT.